Welcome to the Countdown to Happy New Year Year-End Payroll webinar. We know it might feel too early to start thinking about year-end. We haven't even had Halloween, which is my personal favorite holiday. But we felt what better way to close out National Payroll Week than some tips and tricks to help stress less at the end of the year. I am Bridget Klein, Willory's Director of Marketing and Master of Ceremonies. I will be monitoring the chat, the Q&A, and my email for any questions or shout outs. I did put my email in the chat if you have any issues. And again, you are welcome to use the chat and the Q&A. All right, so at Willory, we are more than just a professional services firm. We are your strategic partner in transforming HR and payroll. We have a relentless focus on client-side technology, innovative staffing solutions, and unmatched industry insights. We empower your organization to achieve peak performance and drive sustainable growth. I am joined by Christine Peters, Willory's Director of Consulting, Senior Consultant Tammy Gillenwater, and Consultant Lisa Parrott. Combined, they have over 75 years of payroll and payroll systems experience. They're the brilliance behind this presentation and Willory's consulting services.
Today, what you can expect, obviously, we've gotten through the welcome and introduction sections. What we're going to be sharing with you is a top 10 countdown of the key components of a successful year end for payroll management. At the end of which we will have a toast to bringing in that successful year end and a good happy new year. There will be time for Q&A at the end, just open forum dialogue. As I mentioned, you might be wondering why we're doing year end now at back to school time. And it's really because every year around mid-December, our consulting group gets calls from clients that are realizing they need help with year end payroll. Like it's December 14th and they're like, I have too much to do. Can you help us? And so we've seen this year over year, and we've started to realize we need to get ahead of the curve on this. And some of these people are newer to payroll. They haven't done it. They maybe weren't surprised, or they maybe were caught off guard by some of the things they needed to do. And some were seasoned practitioners, like many of yourselves, that just simply had too many competing priorities at year end. So our goal here today is to empower you with some of these helpful tips and reminders so you can have a successful and smooth year end, get you start thinking about it sooner rather than later. And also just a shameful plug that should you be in need of additional support through the process, or if you simply want to make sure you get through it and have time to enjoy the holidays with your friends and families, Willory does offer year-end payroll support service to help you navigate through the complexities and make it easier for you as you go along. So with that said, I am very pleased to turn it over to Tammy Gillenwater, who is our senior payroll consultant on the team at Willory and who's responsible for much of the content here today. So Tammy, take it away.
Thank you, Christine, and thank you everybody for joining us this morning. This was really timely for me because I literally just finished putting together a year-end project plan for one of my clients yesterday. And as I'm sure many of you recognize the importance of getting started early, now is about the time we need to start thinking about year end. I've already seen, I know at least two of the larger payroll providers have sent out deadlines already for putting in for projects for the rest of the year, because of course they don't want any big projects going on during year end. So the number 10 item is gather your important year-end dates and deadlines and create your project plan. You probably have multiple places you need to get your deadlines from. Your payroll providers, one, any tax filing services, federal, state, and local tax agencies. Those typically don't change. However, we all know that we still need to be diligent and look for those deadlines just in case. Any in-house or external print services, third-party benefits administrators. And I think most of the payroll providers should start releasing their important year-end dates and or checklists, if you're lucky enough that yours provides one. Probably this month, we should see those come out, sometimes October. Then you're going to want to create a year-end project plan or checklist. Even if your provider has a checklist for you to follow, it's probably not everything that you need to have on your checklist. For example, if you have a non-qualified deferred compensation plan, There are certain things you need to do at the end of the year and to get set up for the new year. Those are a little complex. Enrollments need to be made or elections need to be made. You probably need to shut off deductions, turn on new deductions, do a little bit of mapping to make sure that the deferrals are being applied to the proper year's wages and bonuses. That's something that you're going to put in your own checklist. So know what's going on in your organization that's outside of what your payroll provider knows about, and incorporate that into your project planner checklist. If your payroll provider offers a year-end webinar, I know some of them do. I know UKG offers one. I know ADP offers one. And sometimes they offer webinars too for their big releases that come in the fall. Usually a lot of changes are being made in the fall to your system. Make sure that you register and attend. Even if you know that system inside, outside, backwards and forwards, I still recommend that you register and attend the year-end webinars. All right, W-2 printing. Sometimes I feel like this kind of falls through the cracks because nobody's thinking about W-2s in September. But if you are printing your W-2s in-house, you need to estimate the number of forms you need now and place your order for the forms. I've seen a lot of close calls come on forms coming in. Be sure to order enough to allow for reprints if you need to. You never know what's going to happen when you're printing those W-2s. And although I'm sure none of you have ever done this, there is a mistake that I tend to see occasionally, and that is when estimating the number of forms, people are looking at their active employees. And as you know, it's not just your active employees who are receiving W-2s. So make sure you're looking at, the total number of employees processed for the year. If your payroll provider is printing and or mailing your W-2s, make sure you've submitted the proper requests or approvals. Usually they have a form that you need to complete and submit. And make sure you understand what the cost of that is too if you've not done it before. If you are providing online W-2s through employee self-service, make sure you're in compliance with federal and state laws. State laws are going to vary, so you'll need to go to the state's website and make sure that you find out what the regulations are. If you're providing online W-2s via employee self-service, you can do that. You can provide one to everyone without consent. However, you still need to provide a printed copy of the W-2 either by mail or hand delivery to the employee unless you receive consent for online only. So when you're sending out a consent to an employee, it's not necessarily to provide it to them online. You can do that. But they're consenting to not receiving a printed copy of that W-2. Sending a copy of the employee's W-2 via secure email is permitted. However, in my personal opinion, I would receive consent for that. You have to if you're not going to also provide a printed copy. I don't know. For me, even if it's secure email, I'm always a little leery about sending W-2s via email. I would make sure the employees know that it's coming email and they're okay with it. And then consent for electronic version only. I'm sure many of you are doing that. Your systems have the consent process in functionality, but you have to make sure that some disclosures are provided to the employees. And those disclosures are consent for an online W-2 is required, and if not provided, they will receive a paper version. You need to provide the scope and duration of the consent period, the acceptable procedures for receiving a paper W-2, and whether the request for a paper statement is treated as a withdrawal of consent to receive the W-2 online, acceptable procedures of how to withdraw electronic W-2 form consent, along with the effective date and manner you confirm the withdrawal as effective, notification that the withdrawal consent doesn't apply to previous issued W-2s, any conditions that remove your responsibility to furnish a W-2 online, such as termination of employment, Any procedures for updating employee contact information that allows you to provide W-2 forms online. Any changes to the business's contact information and the hardware and software requirements needed to receive the W-2 online, as well as clear instructions on how to access and retrieve it. All of those items I just read to you, those disclosures, are literally word for word right from the IRS's website. So, if you want to go out to the IRS's website and take a look at that, but that's basically what's required in the consent notification. All right, number 8, year-end adjustments. And those will be creeping up on us before we know it. I would keep a list of your year-end adjustments that need to be made, especially if you have new people on your payroll team. Make sure everybody's in the know about what year-end adjustments need to be made. Some examples of what you might have to process at year-end, although I recognize that a lot of you are probably processing these as you go along through the year, which is probably a little bit smarter. Maybe third-party sick pay, personal use of company-provided automobiles, personal use of company-provided cell phones or other devices, qualified moving expenses, incorrect pays for the current year, and stock option payouts. There's more than that, but those are just a few examples. Contact third-party administrators who need to provide data for adjustments and advise them of your deadline. The last thing you want is to be scrambling around at the last minute to get this data from your third parties. Make every effort to process known adjustments in the final payroll of the year to ensure time for corrections. It would be so awesome if every time we processed an adjustment, it came out perfect, but we know that sometimes it doesn't. So we want to allow some time. Usually you have some time between the final payroll of the year and when you are, closing out your year, that you can process some adjustments and corrections if needed. Determine your process for year-end adjustments to be made after the final payroll of the year and communicate this with your entire team as well as other stakeholders. I know that, Cheryl, you're going to laugh because this was, I think, your thing. At my previous employment, we always had a memo that we sent out to the entire payroll team every year, as well as others, maybe some people in HR or whoever else needed to know that this was how our year-end adjustments were going to happen. These were the dates they were going to happen. And after that, it's going to be a W-2 correction. Some of the things you want to determine, will there be a blackout period for additional payments? Sometimes, if your final pay date was December 27th, and you owe somebody, 5 hours of overtime, it's okay to pay that on the next payroll. And it will be considered it will be considered wages for the next year and the year in which it's paid. And it's okay to do that. Overpayments, make sure overpayments come in. I have a client who found out 6 months after W-2s were done that one of the managers had a whole stack of checks that needed to be reversed in their desk. Make sure you're communicating to managers and anyone else that if for whatever reason they're holding on to something or they know about payments that need to be reversed, that they're getting those in to you in time for you to process in the current year. For some systems, you may need to get some off-cycle payrolls scheduled prior to the processing of the final payroll of the year. I know of one particular product that you need to get those off cycles scheduled before the final payroll, or you're not going to be able to schedule off cycles until the following year. So if you have to do that, make sure you know that and you get them scheduled. And, of course, you're going to need to coordinate the timing of year-end off cycles with opening the first payroll in January, because January, that first payroll is a big payroll. You've got a lot to do. So you're trying to close out one year while opening the next year. There's a lot to do. So make sure you coordinate all that within your team. Take it away, Lisa.
Hi. So here's some other items that definitely need to be on your checklist. Some of them, it'd be easy to skip over because you're, for example, verifying that your company's legal name is right and your FEIN is right, especially if you've changed systems and this is your first year doing W-2s on the new system. Make sure your company address is correct as it needs to appear on the W-2. You need to look at your SUI and SDI rates. And if you need your vendor to work with you on that, make sure you look at their deadlines and get that scheduled with them. And last, on the company information, you need to make sure that your state and local tax registrations are complete and you have all your account numbers. And if you know of a new company coming up for the next, new state registration you need for the next year, maybe you can get it started now, and when January comes, you don't have to be in applied for status and all that. So lots to do there. That's from the company side. Then there's also the employee side. So, and this is probably the hard part because it's out of your control, but it's best practice to send out a communication and ask the employees to review their information, make sure you tell them how, so there's no excuses there. And you may need to repeat that communication because it's year end and it's busy for everybody, right? When you get to year end. So, they need their right legal name, like it's on their Social Security card. If you were missing a Social Security number, maybe run a report and look for ones where you use the default just to get somebody in the system, and make sure you have their correct Social Security number and that your addresses for the employees are complete and correct and look valid. So get that out and just keep sending it, keep asking. And then the last part, let's talk about, next slide, you can, the steps that need to happen to reconcile and validate your W-2 information. Good things to put on the checklist, though, just so you make sure you don't skip any of these steps. So, start your preparations in your system to have the setup correct for your W-2s. So make sure your earnings, deductions are mapped correctly. If you've added new ones, make sure you know that they're being handled correctly. Now, for this year, the W-2 form has changed slightly. It's compacted to allow for more copies. So there could be boxes that are no longer on there that, obviously they haven't removed a box that you needed. So however they've worked that out, you have to trust and make sure your vendor has the right one and that, you preview everything. So W-2 box mapping, taxable wages and taxes withheld go to the correct boxes. The big one, box 12, which it seems to change every year and they add things and such. So make sure that's mapped correctly for the data that needs to get on your W-2. I would add to the checklist to run various audit reports. And back to Tammy's point, make sure you identify anything that needs to be, addressed. So you have time in your payrolls to make those adjustments and hopefully have time to verify them. And if you need to make additional adjustments, you have some time. So this would include, making sure no employee exceeded the Social Security tax withheld limit, that your highly compensated employees have the additional Medicare tax, run reports to make sure that nobody has gone over the limits, for flexible spending, HSAs, 401ks, 403bs, whichever type you have. And, so you have time to address those in some manner. Most of the vendors allow you to run these preview W-2s, so make sure as soon as you can, you're looking at those reports. I've seen where people, were busy and kept putting it off, but look at them as soon as the vendor lets you, and check your federal taxable wages should equal gross minus your tax exempt income. For example, expense reimbursements, and last year's Section 125s, and last year 401k, 403bs, or whatever other tax deferred retirement contributions you have at your company. And then Social Security taxable wages should equal gross less the tax exempt income, expense reimbursements, last year's Section 125 deductions. And then you also want to check some of the state and local tax wages. And, of course, there's however many states and locals there are, there's that many different ways to calculate those. So, at least spot check, make sure things look like they're calculating correctly. And also look at what the individual states and localities allow as tax deferred, tax exempt items. Okay, let's see. Another big one is the HSAs. If you have an employer contribution, make sure that that's correct in your system and correctly being added together so that it's on the W-2 correctly. Another, box 12 is the one that seems to cause a lot of the issues. So audit it and make sure, everything is included. And if you need to load your health insurance premiums into your system so that they are printed on your W-2, go ahead and have that on your checklist. And if you can do it early and get that over with, then great. That'll save you, one less thing to worry about when you're trying to celebrate New Year's Day. And let's see, last, make sure that there's no negative taxable wages that would prevent a W-2 from generating. And I know in some systems you have to be careful, because if you have terminated employees with zero wages, if certain boxes are checked, like the pension indicator box, it can generate a W-2 for a zero wage, which no harm's done, but you probably paid for that. And, you don't want to pay for anything you can get away from. So, yeah, so good luck, and just get everything on the checklist, and then you can just work your checklist and hopefully have a great year end.
So thanks, Lisa. So number 4 on our countdown list is to ensure that you have the correct PTO balances. And you may want to partner up with your friends in HR for this, but really make sure that the PTO time taken for the year has been recorded and deducted appropriately from their PTO balances, particularly if you're on a calendar year PTO policy versus an anniversary year policy. And also particularly if your policy allows employees to roll over their balance into the new year, because you want to make sure that they start the new year with the right number of days. This is also important if you don't have a rollover policy, that because employees, you might want to communicate with employees what is left in their balance so they can make arrangements to use it before they lose it. And the earlier you do that, the more opportunity you get them to get those days in. That's a really important important benefit that your company offers. And if it's going to evaporate on January 1st, you want people to take advantage of that time and that benefit before it's the year-end crunch and they maybe can't schedule the time as they would like. So the other really important thing about PTO, and again, you may need to partner with HR or if you have an HRIS administrator, but just make sure you understand the timing on how PTO rolls over to the new year in your system. You may want to work with your vendor partner to, if there is anything new that you need to get set up, and that request might need to go in early as our technology vendors, their people also get really busy at year end. But you also might want to draft some communication to employees at your firm on what to expect after January 1st in terms of what to see as they're looking at their balances, maybe how to read it. So you can kind of get in front of those questions that come up and create people. I know people are generally very protective of their paid time off and they want to make sure they have it and they're getting all of it. So if you can get in front of that, you save some time for everybody involved. Okay, and if you have, I'll just add to that, if you have any planned changes, you are absolutely going to want to reach out to your vendor partner and make sure and test those changes before the new year begins. So we'll move on then to tip number 3. In preparing for the new year, this whole thing is about preparing for the new year, but a lot of it so far has been closing out the old year. So now we're really talking about the things that you need to do for, in this case, 2024. So the first thing you want to do is create your payroll calendar for the upcoming year. You want to take into account any holidays that might fall on a pay date that will affect the payroll processing time, any bank holidays that may affect the timing of ACH payments so that you can process early and work around those dates. You're going to want to have a master calendar that also includes the deadlines for submitting time, updating deductions, and any other changes that are going to impact that payroll. When you have this calendar, you need to share it with the various stakeholders, both within and outside of your firm. So you want to get HR a copy of the payroll calendar. Your managers are going to need a copy, employees, and even externally, like your benefits vendors, especially those ones that you're going to send integration files to. You can customize these calendars by the group. You know, your employees don't necessarily need to know when the ACH payment has to be ready, but they're going to want to know, like, you know, when they're getting paid. Managers probably need to know when time approval is due, because I know a lot of them always need reminders. So anything you can do to get that in front of them earlier, the better. So making sure your payroll calendar is set. And then once you have that, you also need to make sure that your system has the correct dates for next year for your holidays, and you know, and your pay calendar is correct in the system. Some systems have the ability to sort of generate that automatically based on rules that you set up. Some do not. So this is another area where you're going to need to work with your vendor partner to make sure that starting January 1, your system is ready to go and you're all set up for the new year. The other thing you want to do in preparing for the new year is to determine if there's any annual goals that have to be reset. Again, some of the systems do this automatically, but some have to be manually reset. So it depends a lot on which provider you're on. You want to contact them for more information. So you are going to want to obtain the new IRS limits for the upcoming year for HSA, for FSA, contributions to any deferred compensation plans, what the new Social Security limits are. Make sure that your system is set up to comply and impose these new limits, and save you that kind of manual checking. You're also going to want to look for any wage and hour changes that are coming to effect for the new year. Minimum wage, for example, you need to check all states and local changes in additional to federal changes. So depending on the geographic range of your organization, this could be pretty easy or it could be a pretty big task. So make sure you know what's coming down the pipeline in terms of wage and hour changes. And then again, check in and work with your vendor partner about when, if they are pushing out automatic changes, when those will be done in your system, the new limits and the tax rates. So you can go in and look around, make sure it's set up, maybe do some testing to make sure that it's working the way it needs to. Finally, if you do use a tax filing service, you're going to want to make sure you send them all of your notices for unemployment rate changes, for state disability rate changes, and any other tax rates that are specific to your organization that may change with the new calendar year. Tammy.
All right, on to number 2. So we're done closing out our year. We've opened up our new year. We think we're all done, but we're not. And that is because we seem to always have employees who want to claim exempt on their W-4. Now, luckily, with the new W-4, the one really, really great thing about the new W-4 is that there's no box for employees to check to say that they're exempt. So they have to really make a concerted effort to claim exempt on their W-4. But what I find a lot of people don't know this, but employees who claim exempt on their W-4 have to submit a new W-4 every year. They can't just ride that exempt, for 5 years in a row. So you'll need to determine which employees are claiming exempt on their W-4 and send them a notification stating that they must complete a new W-4 form for the new year no later than February 15th or the next business day if that's a weekend or a holiday. That is a must. It is required. If the employee does not submit a new W-4 by February 15th, you must change their W-4 election and withholding tax as if he or she is single or married, filing separately with no other entries in step 2, 3, or 4 on the W-4 form.
All right, so we've gone through all the major items in the checklist, and it's finally the Happy New Year. So I'm going to raise a toast. Got to see if it's in camera. It is sparkling water, not sparkling champagne. So as we raise our glasses to the close of another year, let us also raise a toast to the heroes of year-end, payroll professionals. Their dedication and precision in navigating the complex payroll year-end processes ensure that others can focus on what they do best. In a world of ever-changing regulations and numbers, you ensure our financial well-being. So here's to your tireless efforts, attention to detail, and the countless hours you've invested to ensure payroll is smooth and error-free. Thank you for your unwavering commitment. May the coming year bring you even greater success and prosperity. Cheers. The first question we have is, do you estimate any issues with the new W-2 form in closing out the year end?
I think I put it in the chat before. If they're compressing the W-2 form, I'm worried about box 12 because the number of items in box 12 has grown a lot over the last few years. I did recently see, and I have to go out and read it. I haven't read it yet. There is some guidelines from the IRS on what you need to do if you have to produce multiple W-2s because everything doesn't fit on one. Like I said, I haven't read it, but there is something out there on that. That's my main concern.
Thank you. And what part of the year-end payroll process takes the most time?
That's a hard one. I think Lisa, do you have any? I'm sorry, I'm taking over.
No. What takes the most time?
I feel like that depends on how many component companies you have.
Right. And whether you kept up with auditing various balances and limits during the year, or are you waiting and doing them, and how many additions you have to make. If you have third parties sick and things like that, then, that definitely, that last payroll of the year, and, and it falls at a difficult time for a lot of people. That's probably the hardest part, I think.
Yeah. I'll just add that a lot of companies also like to go live with a new system on January 1. So if you are in that situation, you have the added complexity of training and testing a new payroll system, which just adds to the burden all around. So if that's your case, I'm sorry. And good luck, but we could also help with that.
Yeah. I think getting correct information or getting all your information from third-party administrators and from employees that can be really time consuming and difficult, because I mean, I've literally experienced situations where employees' social security numbers were bouncing back as invalid and the employees were refusing to give valid social security numbers. I'm not sure how they got away with that on the I-9, but I mean, it's something that happens.
Thank you. All right.
Yeah, thank you. Well, first, I just want to thank Bridget for being a great facilitator, mediator, hostess for this event. I'd like to thank Tammy and Lisa for lending their time, energy, and expertise to this presentation. And thank all of you for spending this 45 minutes with us. We do year-end payroll service. We support them through project management and help navigating through all the steps that we talked about today and then some. But we also do offer consulting support around payroll, HR, and the technology for both of those items. So if you are implementing a new system, as mentioned, if you are on a system but it's not quite working the way you'd like, or if you want to pick a new system, if you're tired of yours, we can help with any of those. Or if you have a payroll process, I have like sirens going on in the background. I don't know if you can hear that, but if there's something going on with your payroll and it's not quite working the way you want, or want to know how you can do it better, faster, we can do a payroll assessment and help work through that process. So reach out to Bridget, Tammy, Lisa, myself, or your Willory salesperson. We're happy to share more information on any of those services.